Okay guys, we're starting a new section. We're getting into our Math of Finance. So before we get into the actual content, one thing we do a lot in Math of Finance is we work with percents and we work with money. So we're going to practice doing a little bit of conversions. So the first thing we're asked to do is write each percent as a decimal. So remember, to change a percent to a decimal, what you're going to do is you're going to move the decimal 2 places left. Okay, so for example, 18%, the decimal is behind the 8. So I would go 2 places to the left, and as a decimal that would be 0.18. Now for 3, it is behind the 3, so if I go 2 places to the left, I do need a 0 to hold that place. So that would be 0.03. Now when we have percents like 6.625, these are usually interest rates, and we don't want to round them. So we want to be careful not to lose any numbers. So I'm still just going to go 2 places to the left. I am going to need a 0 placeholder, but I want to make sure to keep all of those other numbers. So 0.06625. Number 4 is a little bit trickier. 7 1/4%. We know that 1/4 is a quarter, or 0.25. So we've rewritten it in decimal form, but we still have not moved the decimal yet. The percent sign is still there. So when we move this 2 places to the left, it becomes 0.0725. So just because you went ahead and converted your fraction into a decimal doesn't mean you've converted from a percent yet. So that is a 2-step process. All right, so if we are going to go the other direction, write a decimal as a percent, we're going to do the opposite. So this time we're going to move the decimal 2 places right. And put a percent sign. Okay, so for the first one, we would take the decimal, we would go 2 places to the right, and that would become 5.7%. And if we do the same thing for number 2, we're going to move that decimal 2 places to the right, and that's going to become 13, and we need to remember to put that percent sign on there. Now remember, when we get down to ones that have got a lot of decimal places, remember we're not supposed to round unless we're told to. So if I move 2 places to the right, that would become 120.163%. For number 4, 2 places to the right, I still have 1 0 there, so that becomes 0.025, and don't forget your percent. And then for 0.6, I have to go 2 places to the right, so I do need a little 0 placeholder there, and that becomes 60%. Now one of the trickiest things we do is when we get a number out of our calculator that's not particularly pretty, sometimes we're asked to write our answer as a rounded percent. So as a percent rounded to the nearest thousandth, which means 2 decimal places. So the thing you have to be careful of here is you convert to a percent, then you round. If you round it to 2 decimal places first and then you move your decimal over, then you've no longer rounded to the correct number of places. So for number 1, I'm going to move that decimal over 2 places, and that's going to give me 33.333, and that's going to keep going, but I've now changed it to a percent. All right, so now I want to go ahead and round this to 2 decimal places. So I look at my second place, and then I also look at the one right next to it, the 3rd place. Okay, so this one tells me whether to round up or down. All right, so in this case, this 3 tells me to round down. So that's just going to be 33.33% when I round. Okay, so let's try number 2. I move this 2 places to the right. It becomes 6.54269, and I don't really know what happens after that. I just know that it keeps going. So once again, I'm rounding to the second decimal place. So I look at the number next to it. That's a 2. So once again, I'm going to round down. So I'm going to leave that 4 as a 4. And it becomes 6.54%. If you try to round it to 2 decimal places, before you move it, you get you'll end up getting 0.07, and then you'll end up with 7%. And 7% and 6.54% are not particularly close together, so we want to be careful about doing that. We always want to do the percent first. All right, so let's try number 3. I'm going to move this 2 places. That's going to give me 12.7651 and so on percent. I'm rounding to the second decimal place. So I look at the number in the third decimal place. This time it's a 5. So this time I'm going to round up. That means that's going to round to 12.77. So the 6 rounded up to a 7%. All right, and then finally my last one. If I move it 2 places, I get 66.666 repeating percent. Once again, I'm going to the second decimal place. I look at the number in the third decimal place. If it's 5 or bigger, I round up. So that's going to give me 66.67%. So when you're doing Math of Finance, if you get your percent a little bit wrong, and you start multiplying it by big dollar amounts, it does give you a rounding error. So you need to be really careful with that. All right, so speaking of money, on all of these, we're going to round to the nearest penny. So remember, that's going to be the second decimal place. I'm going to go through and try to highlight that on each one. All right, so that's the place I'm rounding to. So I'm going to use the number next to it to tell me whether to round up or down. Okay, so I'm just going to go through and get that number there. All right, so I'm still going to have $1,672, but when I get down to the 2, the 9 tells me to round it up, so that rounds up to 0.03. Okay, so money is always going to be to the nearest penny. For number 2, I'm still going to have $237,400. I have 0.362. The 2 tells me to round this down, meaning it stays a 6, so 36 cents. For number 3, I've got $47. And this one's a little tricky because the 8 rounds the 9 up. So it rounds it up to 10, which means my cents are going to round from 39 up to 40. And then the last one we have is $324.99, but the 5 rounds it up. So if I round 99 cents up, it's going to round up to the next dollar if I add a penny to that. And that's going to become $325.00.